Madam Speaker, it is with great pleasure that I rise to second the bill and also to lend my voice of support and amplify the voices of those who are supporting this smoking bill. Designated areas. I should admit, Madam Speaker, that I'm not feeling 100%, but I did drink some of the special tea that you offer, and it seems to be working. What's in the tea? I don't know, but it's doing something to me, but I'm feeling well. And after such strong presentations from both sides of this honorable house, I think I have very little to say except to provide some chronology internationally and regionally as it relates to designated areas and smoking bill, and also to reinforce why this is important when premised on our sustainable island state agenda and SDGs and grounded in justice and human rights. Now, as said before, the purpose of this bill is to promote public health by reducing exposure to tobacco and other smoke in certain public places by designating certain specified public places as smoking areas, to prohibit smoking outside of a designated space, and also all the related incidental matters associated with smoking in public. The history of smoking designation is quite extensive and starts as early as 1964 in the US, for example. That's when the first Surgeon General's report established that the adverse health effects of smoking. By 1965, there was the first law requiring the labeling of cigarettes and health warnings. That was the Cigarette Labeling and Advertising Act of 1965. By 1972, Madam Speaker, another report of the Surgeon General, The Health Consequences of Smoking, discussed the potential adverse effects of secondhand tobacco smoke in people with pre-existing diseases. By 1973, we had additional restrictions. By 1986, we saw several reports which concluded that involuntary smoking has adverse effects for non-smokers. By 1992, we saw several reports from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency as it relates to respiratory health, the effects of passive smoking, lung cancer, and other diseases. And because I'm not a medical doctor, I will not go any deeper into that type of legislation. Safe to say, we're recognizing the impact of secondhand smoke on persons' health. In the Caribbean, we have examples from PAHO, which sees this legislation as a public health policy. According to PAHO, exposure to secondhand smoke causes death and disease, such as heart disease, chronic respiratory disease, and several Caribbean countries have already taken action to protect people from exposure to tobacco smoke or smoke, because we're not here to really say this smoke versus that smoke. PAHO is pushing a smoke-free Caribbean campaign which focuses on designating public spaces for smoking. It developed in collaboration not just with religious groups or with the Ministry of Health, but with the ministries of youth across the Caribbean. A campaign to promote youth awareness and laws and put laws in place to protect people's health. Some of the campaigns, Madam Speaker, and I'm happy to speak about the impact of this bill and its links to protecting our young people. Hashtag Trash That Ash, a movement for a smoke-free Caribbean, and a Speak Up movement for young people to speak about their rights as it relates to smoking in public places. It's the law. In 5 Caribbean countries, they have already put laws in place to ban smoking in workplaces, in enclosed public spaces, and to designate places for smoking in public. It's your right. It's our right to enjoy a cafe, a restaurant, or a club, or any other enclosed public space smoke-free. It's also our right to protect our health. Exposure to secondhand smoke, as we have all said, causes serious health problems, serious cardiovascular problems. And with the Caribbean, as it is with NCDs, we do not want to increase our mortality rates through secondhand smoke. And it also speaks to future generations. The Caribbean has one of the highest rates of youth smoking in the Americas. That is problematic. If our youngest generation are smoking, it means in 10, 15, 20 years, we are going to have problems with people with respiratory diseases, cardiovascular diseases. So there is a need to protect our population. It's also alarming that mortality rates from smoking in the region are particularly high compared to the rest of the world. And we're having an increasing percentage of deaths from cancer and other related smoking issues. This is why PAHO is pushing a smoke-free Caribbean through designating public spaces. I'm happy to use the example of Jamaica. In Mexico, actually, there is a total ban on smoking in public places, including hotels, beaches, parks, etc. And this was done in January 2023. In Jamaica, there is a comprehensive ban on smoking in indoor places, indoor workspaces, and public transport. And we all know that Jamaica is the land where the birthplace of Rastafarianism. It's also the birthplace of marijuana. Every single reggae song you can think of references cannabis. But even there, where they're pushing Rastafarian rights and people's rights to use cannabis, there is a ban and management on how you smoke in public places. Madam Speaker, this bill is about justice, it's about peace, and it's about the rule of law. When it comes to smoking in designated spaces and Rastafarian rights, it's about justice. Agenda 2030 of the Sustainable Development Goals speaks to leaving no one behind. This means that we have an obligation as a progressive democracy premised on human rights, justice, and freedoms that we push a legislative reform agenda built and grounded in human rights. And for this reason, I want to pause to thank the Attorney General and his chambers and the mover of the bill, our Prime Minister, for this very forward-thinking approach to banning smoking, or rather, designating public spaces for smoking. If we are to transition to a sustainable island state, then we have to protect human rights, religious rights, and freedoms. SDG 16 in particular speaks to peace, justice, and strong institutions. What does this mean? The main aim is to promote a just and peaceful and inclusive society. If we are providing access to justice for everyone and building an effective and accountable and inclusive institutions for everyone, Rastafaris, non-smokers, smokers, young people, the elderly, then we have to respect everyone's human rights, we have to respect everyone's religious rights, and we have to protect the most vulnerable. It's the rule of law. So as a sustainable island state, St. Kitts and Nevis will be working collectively towards protecting basic human rights of every resident and every citizen. And in promoting a sustainable island state, we must be tolerant. We must protect religious rights. We must protect our freedoms. How do we work collectively? We work through the Attorney General's chambers, having consultations with those stakeholders who this bill affects the most. We amplify the voices of those less heard. I'm thankful to see the members of the Rastafarian community here, because your voices are being amplified by every parliamentarian who is here, who stayed, who debated, and who will vote on passing this bill to protect your rights and your freedoms. There is a willingness of this government and this parliament, for that matter, to adjust legislation so that rights are protected. And finally, we have a systems approach to good governance. Good governance isn't, we want to have a good inclusive government. It's action-based. And action-based means we come to Parliament on the eve of a 420 friendly music festival to demonstrate our commitment to allowing Rastafarians and other smokers and non-smokers their rights to enjoy music festival as they see fit. So, for example, if you need to drink tea to have a good fest, drink your tea. If you need to take 1 or 2 puffs to have a good fest in the 420 designated space, you do it. I've heard some people say with 2 puff music is just like, oh my goodness, I wouldn't know. But whatever it does, sure? I wouldn't know.
I like that statement.
You wouldn't know.
I wouldn't know. But whatever it does for you, you do it. If it brings you closer to your, whoever your God is, then do it. But there are others who we need to protect. The asthmatic amongst us, the young, and those persons who generally do not want to deal with smoke. And that's why this bill speaks to the people. And I really appreciate the people-centered approach of this legislative reform. Smokers, you have your rights to smoke in designated spaces. Non-smokers, we're protecting your rights not to be engulfed by secondhand smoke. And young people, we are protecting you from secondhand smoke, from exposure at public events. And I want to use this opportunity to reference a sporting activity I was at recently, and I was in the stands. And in the stands were babies, a mother was nursing, there were elderly persons, young people, Rastafarian, etc. And in that stand of a mixed demographic, a few persons were smoking cannabis. Now, I don't have a problem with anybody who wants to smoke. I cannot. But what I do have a problem with as someone who promotes justice and human rights is a young baby being nursed or just being there with a mother who wants to support an activity having to inhale smoke, regardless of what type of smoke it is. That is problematic. Or with a cousin of mine who often goes with me, who's severely asthmatic, saying, I have to leave, I cannot stay, I have to leave. Now, you want to enjoy a sporting activity or a musical event, but you cannot. Because someone else is exercising their right to smoke, but you cannot exercise your right not to be engulfed by smoke. That is what we're talking about. Everyone exercise your rights in safe spaces, and that's justice. I want to end by saying, if our government and our parliament continues a legislative reform agenda premised on justice, inclusivity, peace, and protecting all peoples, all residents, all religions, then we are headed for a sustainable island state that will be unmatched, not just by any other country in the region, but globally. This is a bill that we all have to support for everyone's rights. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you to the